So I just wanted to do a recap really quick. We had a lot of local members travel down that did want to testify on this, and really that's where the idea for this bill came from. In 2015, one of our iron mines on the Marquette Iron Range was idled, the Empire Mine, and losing almost 400 jobs in our community was a huge deal. And a lot of us began to ask the question, why are we losing a mine when Minnesota is only growing theirs? And what we found was strategically, they started probably about 15 years ago now with a long-term strategic plan. So why the mining bill? Whether we like it or not, our per capita consumption of minerals in 2018 totaled over 40,000 pounds per person. This is not just iron, but you can see many of the other elements there. A lot of people have asked, is it safe? Do we want this committee to come together to look at continuing mining, making it safer, or freezing it, especially when it comes to our metallic mineral mining? What we found was more than 3 dozen federal environmental laws and regulations cover all aspects of mining. In addition, we have state laws and regulations that mining companies must follow. And back when we passed Part 632, which is our metallic mining law, it was unanimous, Democrats, Republicans on both sides, both chambers, and it is currently the law that we use today. Some of the federal laws: National Environmental Policy Act, Federal Land Policy and Management Act, Clean Air Act, Safe Drinking Water Act. And as you go down the list, you can see that there are many safeguards in place versus what we had a century ago when we had a mining boom, especially in Michigan. So why this bill now? As I mentioned, when the Empire Mine idled, we weren't competitive. And the new era of mining, I'll have my policy legislative aide pass around some of the pellets. Back in the early 70s, when we mined all of the high-grade ore, we had only low-grade ore left. And we had to come up with a process and a way that we could still extract the iron out of the rock and bind it together and create these pellets that go into the blast furnace. That was back in 1971. Now we're in a new era of mining with iron that we want to use recycled metal. And Michigan currently does not have a pellet, a direct reduced iron pellet that can actually be melted with recycled steel. And so that really is what determined the fate of the Empire Mine. So what does Minnesota do that we don't do here? Most of our mining taxes in Michigan go to 2 funds. They either go locally or they go to the school aid fund. And some of the royalties do go to the state. But in Minnesota, you'll see that they actually have a wide range of funds that I think would benefit Michigan and certainly include a lot more stakeholders in feeling that we have a good handle on mining and we're doing it responsibly. One of the funds is the Taconite Economic Development Fund. This is where we take a portion, or they take a portion of the taxes. They can actually match that back to the companies to help do research, with first preference given to environmental research being done near or on any of the mine sites. They also have an environmental legacy fund. And if you look down, it's the second one from the bottom. It's called the Taconite Environmental Protection Fund. So 34.8 cents of every ton actually goes into this fund, again, to help with either research projects, legacy costs. And if you remember from last session, we did appropriate money for the stamp sands project in the Keweenaw Peninsula. This is where we have piles of mining waste sitting very close to Lake Superior that's beginning to wash into Lake Superior and cover the spawning beds where our whitefish lay their eggs. And so now it's It's becoming a threat to our Native American communities that depend on this as a major source of their economic income. Sport fishing and many other groups that would like to see us do something with this. And just having to come to the legislature every year and request funding, we think there's a better way to do it. So what are universities doing? I think as we look at PFAS and what we can do partnering with Michigan State, their researchers, their experts, I'd like to also look at Michigan Tech to see how can they grow their program as one of the first colleges that was a school of mining. They do have a side group called the Advanced Sustainable Iron and Steel Center. They are doing research all over the world. It's not just research for our mining companies in Michigan. They do a fair amount of research for companies even from Minnesota, Florida, and Europe and Australia. One of the great news stories that one of the professors, Dr. Tim Isley, who did write in a letter of support last time, one of the things he's working on, phosphorus eaters, using bacteria to purify iron ore. So one of the things about the new era of mining is we're looking at getting away from chemicals and how we bind the ore, how we treat it, separate it. What can we use naturally? And when we look at the phosphorus content in steel, this is what creates brittle steel. And so very important part to mining, happening about 100 miles away from the mines in the UP. The Resell Center. So I've heard a lot of groups, especially our environmental groups, talk about how can we recycle metal? How can we recycle our batteries and some of our cell phones and TVs that right now it's just not economically feasible. Michigan Tech is looking at doing the first lithium-ion recycling R&D center, doing a lot of research coming out of there. How cool would it be to link up with our big three auto companies in Lower Michigan and create a partnership? So again, looking at how Minnesota does it, very complex mining guides, make sure that it goes to funds that benefit not only the communities surrounding mining, the state, education funding, but again, they've thought long-term, putting that education funding in, putting the economic fund together, and they even fund their Hockey Hall of Fame out of this. So no suggestions there, but just bringing that up. One thing a lot of people ask is, does Michigan have as many mining jobs, or could they as other states? And even though Minnesota has several iron mines versus our one or hopefully two soon, what we found was that the mining jobs don't lag that far behind. When you look at the GDP, Michigan has a fairly strong GDP coming from mining jobs. And what makes up for our lack of iron mining jobs really in Michigan is our aggregate industry. And being one of the largest in the country, it's certainly an important part of what we do, how we build our roads. And that is why we've included them, knowing that they have very complex issues as well that deal especially with our local government, our townships and our counties. So metallic mining in our modern lives. I often hear, I'm okay with iron mining, I'm not okay with metallic. Oftentimes you hear it called sulfide mining, copper, nickel mining. But without it, we simply would not have our modern lives. A new metal that they just came up with, nitinol. It's malleable yet strong. It's nickel and titanium, and it allows stents to be inserted without open heart surgery. Another one, I'm a type 1 diabetic, 31 years. Medtronic is doing a lot of research that actually looks at spinal cord stimulation as an effective non-opioid treatment for chronic intractable pain. Couldn't do this without mining. For myself with diabetes, I have a continuous glucose monitor and glucose strips that I test my blood on. and just looking at how we use metal in those little test strips. So it's everywhere, even though often we don't realize it. So I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that this bill can start conversations around urban mining. You know, e-waste, how do we take care of the planet? How do we go to that next generation? And how do we compete with states like Minnesota, who have already created a pellet for that next generation of iron mining?
We are now to the grand finale, which is a motion to refer House Bill 4227, which will now be H3, to the House Committee on Ways and Means. Is there a motion to that effect? Representative Wakeman so moves. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chairman Howell,
Yes.
Representatives Wakeman,
Yes.
Talley,
Yes.
Riley,
Yes.
Menden,
Yes.
Eisen,
Yes.
Sowerby,
Yes.
Cambensy,
Yes.
Kohetzky.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays, and 0 passes. House Bill 4227 has been reported with recommendation as amended as substitute H3 to Ways and Means.
Very good. And I have to say, I really appreciate the cooperation of all the interest groups, Representative Cambensy's staff, all the folks that worked on this bill, the DEQ. This is how legislation should work, and very pleased to have it move to this stage.